Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the B4 Live webinar, looking at Oxfordshire's property market. We've got 4 guests today joining us from as far away as Atlanta in America. So let's just say hello to each of them in turn, and then we'll give them their brief sort of 4 or 5 minute slot just to talk about their take on Oxfordshire's property market. Then an opportunity for a bit of discussion between them, and also bring you guys in if you've got any questions for them. So if you do have a question, please do put it in the chat box, and then I'll coordinate it with the speakers, and you're either welcome to come on and ask direct, or I can ask on your behalf. So let's welcome first Richard Venables from VSL. Good morning, Richard.
Hi, Richard. Hi, all. Nice to see you all.
Nice to see you. How are things for you?
Yeah, no, good, thank you. Good, yeah. All the better for seeing you and your Christmas tree. Yeah,
I'm trying to make the effort. Apparently it's Christmas jumper day today, and I just on where I was the only one without one, so I got pretty hammered. So and so I put the Christmas tree in, so a little bit festive. Elaine McKechnie from Oxfordshire Innovation, how are you?
Hello, yeah, good, thank you. And I haven't got a Christmas jumper, but I am kind of
Why did you not got any Christmas earrings yet?
Well, I thought sparkles and Christmas earrings would just be too much. So, but they've been out the rest of the week.
Hasn't been in the past, so. Excellent. Dean Averies, Director from Beard Construction. Good afternoon, Dean. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm very well, thank you. I'm afraid I haven't got a Christmas tree, Christmas jumper, or sparkly earrings, but I'm here in person and very much looking forward to Christmas.
Excellent. Good to see you. And joining us from Atlanta, so he's a bit bleary-eyed, 7 o'clock in the morning, is Arjun Kaicker. Good afternoon, Arjun. How are you?
Good morning. Yeah. It's not bad early, it's 7. I've got like a Christmas star type. I was going to say, move your head, and you've done it. So obliterated my effort. No, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah. No, it's fine. Good to see you. Well, thanks everybody for joining us, and to everybody that's joined to watch this afternoon. We're going to start with Dean. Dean, you can tell us a little bit about Beard and how you're finding things at the moment.
Yeah, so we've had for everyone, I'm sure it's been a roller coaster year. We started off the year with a reasonable head of work. We've then come across some challenging times around the middle, and we worked very hard to fill our order book. And actually, towards the end of the year, now we're going into the new 2021 with quite a healthy order book.
And you were going to share some slides, I think, just show about Beard sort of values and how you work. And
sorry,
no, brilliant.
Right, so
perfect.
Yeah, thank you for that. So apologies. So I was going to spend 5 minutes or so just talking about a PowerPoint slide that we roll out to all our new employees, which really focuses on the things that we measure, the values and the behaviours that we expect from our people. And during that, I'll talk through some of the challenges that we've had this year. So we have a mission statement that obviously tells us it forces us to I guess behave in the way that we can and be the very best that we can. The slide in front of you is an important slide. It demonstrates how we believe that we need to run a successful construction business. So starting with the bottom, solid foundations. The company systems. Our systems have held up very well this year. We had the challenge of March when we were all forced to close our office and work from home. The IT stood up very well, so that's a good success for us. Health and safety. It's been a good year for our health and safety performance, but we have had some accidents, so we work very hard to learn from them when we do have any. Financial control. It's been an average year in terms of profitability. COVID has obviously had an impact on our cost base throughout this year. Then we move up to project delivery. One of the key drivers that we measure with project delivery is finishing our projects on time.
I forwarded it to you. He sent you a refund confirmation by email. I've sent it to you.
Dom, you're not on mute. That refund was coming my way, by the way.
So yeah, project delivery has been mixed. We have had some delays with COVID. People, we've been able to retain our outstanding people this year. There have been some challenges. I think one of the key issues we're all worried about is mental health agenda and the struggles that people are that may be happening out there. Work winning, I touched on earlier. It's been a challenging middle part of the year, but subsequent to that latter part of the year, we've actually pretty much filled our order book, so that's a very healthy position. And then moving into one of the outcomes from all of those things, if we get those right, is profitable business. And we work very hard to try and get the balance between putting our customers first, excelling in their customer care, and also that strong commercial acumen. We've got 2 bank accounts, the obvious financial bank account. So we're not a charity. We expect to make a small profit on our schemes. But just as important as that is our reputational bank account. We expect our customers to enjoy the experience of working with us and ultimately recommend us and work with us again. Our values are friendly, efficient and committed. They're very important to us, and we expect all of our people to conduct themselves in accordance with our values. But I think one of the other things that I would say is a strength is knowing what we're best at and then what we're not so good at. So, for example, we know that there are competitors out there that are better at us at specific sectors. So sector specialists such as new build hotels, fast food outlets, and so on. The behaviours that we expect our people to conduct themselves in accordance with. So acting with integrity, and the old saying that you're as good as your last job is very, very important, especially in Oxfordshire, small area. And we focus on customers that want the best value, not necessarily the cheapest price. We don't set out to be the cheapest. We set out to be the best at what we do. And encouraging all of our staff to be proactive, always to challenge, always to be proactive and never passive. And the outcome of all of that is a very, very high proportion of repeat business that we have. Things we measure. So obviously we measure our finishing on time, projects finishing on time. Did we complete our snags and defects on time and promptly? Minimising waste is something that it obviously costs us money, but also reputation. If our customers see us wasting either materials or being inefficient in what we do, it can damage our reputation. And ultimately the communication that goes through the defect liability period. We encourage all our staff to have a positive attitude to change. So we accommodate it, we're flexible, we work with it, but we expect to be treated fairly. And we work very hard to give our customers no surprises, either in what the project's going to cost or when it's going to finish. And our supply chain. So we expect our supply chain to be an extension of Beard and the people to behave in accordance with our values. So ultimately, what we expect from our supply chain is what we commit to them, we will pay on time. We'll create an environment where they can work safely and ultimately deliver a successful project and work efficiently. And what we expect from them in return is to be competitive, be flexible, clear communication, and be very proud of the quality that they deliver. In terms of people management, performance management, we spend a lot of time making sure that we identify the behaviours that are necessary, and ultimately what is an effective performer, a superior performer, and an expert performer. And this is an extract from our competency matrix that everyone has in the business. We all have strengths and weaknesses. And I guess what we try and identify is where people's strengths are, where they can improve. And everyone needs to work from the left towards the right. So to move from an effective to a superior and a superior to an expert performer. We believe that the key drivers are obsessing about delivery, making sure that we constantly keep putting our customers first. Accept we make mistakes, and when we do, be open with them and share and identify with both within Beard and with our customers how we've learned from those mistakes. Good financial control and giving opportunity to staff to grow. And ultimately, if we get all those things right, our reputation grows, we're profitable, and people get the important job satisfaction. That concludes my presentation. Sorry, it was a very quick whistle stop through that. Normally takes about 30 minutes to run through that, so I'll stop sharing my screen.
You're on mute, Rich.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks, Dean. Great to hear how Beard go about their business in terms of your vision for the future for next year, and obviously what's happened this year and how you see the market in 2021. Could you just give us a little bit of a insight into where Beard are?
Yeah, of course. So for us, some key decisions we've made this year was to keep our sites going. That was really important, and the benefit of that, the customer goodwill that we've generated by keeping our sites going has been really, really good and very, very much appreciated. We adapted to we're used to attending interviews in person on the work winning side of things, so we have to adapt very quickly to securing new work via this virtual forum. So we invested in some new slide decks that focus on our strengths and so on, and obviously focusing on our strength, which we see our financial stability as being a key asset of ours. In terms of next year, I would say probably the top 3 or 4. Brexit is going to impact on us. We've still got the after effects of COVID and making sure we don't become complacent with that. I think financial stability of our supply chain is going to be really, really important. Unfortunately, many subcontractors and customers won't be able to trade through these challenging times. So I think that's something we're very mindful of. I think the balance of flexible working, what is right to work, people who work from home compared to in the office, and especially the more junior staff of creating an environment where they've got someone to bounce an idea off. I definitely think the balance of virtual meetings and face-to-face meetings is going to be another challenge. And the very last one is networking. I think networking is so important in Oxfordshire. And again, those friendships that go around meeting people outside of work in a face-to-face environment, I think is something that we need to make sure that when it is appropriate, we return to those times.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for that. Any questions anybody has for Dean about his view of the Oxfordshire's property market? Dean, please put it in the chat, and then we can put that to Dean on your behalf later, or you can come on screen direct. Richard Venables from VSL. Richard, your view of Oxfordshire's property market moving forward and how it's been for you.
Yeah, firstly, I found the Christmas jumper. There you go.
Oh, good effort.
Perfect.
So let us down.
Let me reflect on the property market as I see it, and what we might expect next year. So I think we don't fully know the impact of it at all. There's a lot of discussion about it, and there are trends still emerging, and it'll differ on both a national and a regional perspective. So what's going to happen in London is going to be very different to what's going to happen in Oxford. But I think let's deal with the things that we do know. And in that respect, we know that there's been significant behavioural change and adaptation to working online. And it's been challenging, as Dina said. There's the social impact, the well-being impact, isolation. I think it's impacted on us all, and we're all looking forward to going back to some sense of normality. But I think it's going to be a very different normality that we face. From the office perspective, we've not yet seen in Oxfordshire a sort of a massive dump of stock on the market or lease terms changing significantly. There's still activity going on. There's been some stock coming back on the market, but it's not sort of bombed. And rental levels have held up, and in fact, rent levels have climbed significantly in the city centre due to lack of supply. And the driver in our market is increasingly becoming focused on science and technology, which is probably not unsurprising given the global spotlight that we have on Oxford and the vaccine research that's happened here. There's some buzzwords that are coming about, though, in the market at the moment, which sort of reflect on some of the themes that are going to come through. Repurposing is a big issue that's happening. And in the office market, what we're finding is that we're seeing adaptation of commercial buildings towards science and technology adaptation. So we're seeing a lot of buildings that we're dealing with on the Oxford Business Park. When we now get them back as vacant stock, we're making sure that those buildings become adaptable to laboratory use. So we're putting in greater availability of drainage, air handling. We're tending to actually specify things as shell rather than fitted labs, because there's such a great variety of science and tech around. But we're certainly repurposing whatever comes back. There's also a theme of hotelization that's coming into the market, and really in a commercial property context, that means customer care. You're looking at your tenant as a client rather than just a tenant, and you're looking at how to make that experience better. Experience is another issue that we're facing with employees. So many people have been working from home, and some are quite comfortable working from home. Others, we know, younger staff really desperate to get back. But that employee experience in the office has to change, and the workplace has to be seen as somewhere that's not only comfortable work in a COVID environment, but also somewhere that we want to go to. And then the other theme that's coming through is flexibility, which is being driven in the market over the last couple of years anyway. But lease lengths, how we actually use the space, and then hours of work that we actually spend in it. So we don't quite know where we're going, but I think there are some themes about and outcomes of what's going to happen. So I think Q1 and Q2 next year, we will see employers encouraging their employees to come back to work. I think in Oxford, it's going to be an easier transition back to work because most people travel by car rather than by public transport. It's going to be a very different scenario in London, where public transport is the main means of travel to work. And I think there will be a more staggered approach there. Certainly companies are looking at their space requirements, and this is more in the professional sector at the moment. So solicitors, accountants, surveyors are looking at their overall staff count, but also how they use their space. Oxford is mainly an SME territory area. So many of those small and medium-sized enterprises, once they've looked at their desking density and the requirement for more meeting rooms, they're probably finding that they need about the same amount of space. As I said, there's no dump of stock on the market at the moment, and we don't foresee that there will be a massive amount of supply coming back on the market. There's no new building or very limited new building in the marketplace, so supply levels are relatively contained. And we are seeing now as well that science and technology demand being driven forward. There's been a bit of a dip in it, but it's coming back strongly, and we've got plenty of those clients that we're speaking to at the moment. So we're looking at growth in that sector going forward. And I guess just wanted to finish with the comment that a client gave to me the other week, who said, it's the death of the office has been over exaggerated. The office isn't dead, it's just evolved. And I think that's what's going to happen going forward.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Richard. As said in the chat, if anybody has got any questions for any of our speakers, please do put them in there and we can ask them at the end. It is probably likely we will run over 12:30. It was quite an ambitious window in which to fit all you guys in. Elaine McKechnie. So Elaine, do you want to give yourself a bit of an introduction to, give an introduction to Oxford Innovation, your sort of national perspective, and maybe how you're seeing the property market in Oxfordshire at the moment?
Yeah, sure. It was actually quite useful to have Richard going first, because I think that's quite interesting to hear on a very broad basis how the property market is faring. And actually, we're seeing very, very similar things. Some of the things I'm going to say are quite similar. For those of you who don't know, we run innovation spaces, so that's largely office space, but also lab space and kind of workshop engineering type space as well. The vast majority of our centres are deliver some form of business support, and that's been a very key part of our differentiation in our history, but also moving forwards. And I will just touch briefly on our kind of experience during the pandemic. I mean, our first thoughts were, we need to make some quick decisions. I'm sure everybody will associate with that, but cash flow at the beginning was our number one priority. And actually, as things kind of started calming down and we started seeing a bit more kind of visibility over how things were behaving, we were able to, we started seeing a few companies giving notice or potentially contracting, but actually some of them then retracted their notices, and lo and behold, we'd already sold their offices. So there are some, as Richard touched on, the supply and demand curve has not really changed. We've probably lost about 10% of space, I would say, across our national network, about 26 centres. And we've refilled about 9% of it. So we are slightly behind on occupancy, but actually in the grand scheme of things, not bad at all. I would say that we are, across the portfolio, we've got some patches where prices have had to have been discounted. That's not in Oxfordshire, interestingly. It's generally our more northern centres who seem to have struggled more. During the second lockdown then, the overriding, I mean, we stayed open throughout, and we did furlough about 75% of our staff, so that in the first lockdown we were really just running on a skeleton service. The second lockdown was more than a skeleton service, and actually we kept footfall up in our centres probably around the 60-70% mark. Companies were keen to come in. I think people were fed up of working from home. I guess in terms of lessons and trends that we're seeing, there are three things that I think we've benefited from, and they actually align very well with what Richard has just talked about. So the first one being support. We don't just provide office space, we provide supportive, curated environments where the office is actually just a commodity, but everything else around it actually really strengthens the offer and makes people want to come in. They see extra benefit, and as you can imagine, that support element came into its own even more when we first went into lockdown, and businesses were having to pivot and adjust and diversify very, very quickly, and we were able to help them do that with some strategic support for them. The second point was around community and collaboration. I don't know about anybody else, but I find collaboration, brainstorming, working on stuff together really, really hard to do through Teams. And I suspect others will find that as well. And one of the things that we're experiencing is where we've got a really good community. I mean, one example, not Oxfordshire, but down in East Hampshire, we've got a little space cluster in a centre in Borden, and the companies, occupancies actually increased about 20% in that centre because companies wanted to come in, they want to be part of that sector-based community, and I think that it's just human nature that we want to be with one another. The final point is, again, very, very similar to what Richard said, is around specialist facilities. So anywhere where we've got lab space, we've got engineering space or kind of dry lab space, or anywhere where people can do technical things has fared very, very well. In fact, we've now got waiting lists. We're in the process of developing additional lab space at the Wood Centre for Innovation up at Headington, just because the demand is so high at the moment. I suspect most of what I've just talked about is because companies are the types of companies we're attracting are creative, they're innovative businesses, but it sounds like that's happening across the business market as well. So I think that's really interesting. As Richard said, anywhere with parking is popular. Those relying on public transport are less so. We've also seen a big drop in co-working, or we did at the very beginning. What I mean by co-working is rather than private offices where you're sharing a room or an area with other companies or other people. That didn't do very well at all during the first lockdown, as you can imagine. and inquiries have been low. However, there are some new emerging markets coming out of that, where, for example, corporates, where they might have shut their offices, or perhaps they've shut their satellite offices, they've still got people and individuals and employees that are wanting to have a space away from their home. And so we've seen a kind of emergence of that sort of sector. In terms of what next, I mean, it is still too early to tell, but we know that there is a yearning for human interaction, and I think people will be coming back as quickly as they can. But perhaps using that time and that space in slightly different ways. Perhaps they're not in full time. Maybe they're in, 2 or 3 days a week rather than in every day to do their day-to-day work. We're seeing towns generally, and I know Oxford obviously is a city, but it's on the small end of the city definition, and so I think anywhere that has got that you can, you're not having to travel across the whole city via public transport, that those smaller conurbations seem to be doing better, and more kind of hub and spoke models I think are likely to come up. We're seeing a demand for much more variety of space types. So even within those co-working examples I've just described, Teams and Zoom, they're not going to go away. So we need to find these private booths, spaces for people to work in and take those kind of semi-private calls. And just finally, not really relevant to us in Oxford Innovation. Well, it kind of is. We're getting a lot of councils, particularly across the country, saying, we've got a dying high street, what can we do about it? Can we put an innovation centre in there? And I think the answer is potentially yes, an innovation space might add a bit of value to that high street. But really, the property industry and, the central local government, we need to do something about our high streets and our retail spaces. I think it's perhaps less of a concern in Oxford than in other places, but as a nation, we need to find a solution to this high street conundrum, because they're not going to go away, and they will go away, but people still want them, and I think there's still a demand for them. So yes, that was me.
Brilliant. Thanks, Elaine. I appreciate it. Just conscious of time, and Arjun got a full day ahead of him, so let's bring Arjun in all the way over from Atlanta. Arjun, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Great to be here.
No, thank you for joining us. I wanted to get Arjun in really. Maybe you can just elaborate on your background, Arjun, and maybe just give a bit of an insight into, as an architect, how you're seeing architects like yourself thinking about the office space of the future.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I come from Oxford, and when I do get to come to England, I come to Oxfordshire probably 3 or 4 times a year to see my sister, who lives in Bicester. And but I work for a global architecture firm, Zaha Hadid Architects, and we do what I specialise in mainly is office design, and we do that across the world. So I've been looking at some of the more global trends, and it's really interesting to listen to everyone before, particularly what Elaine has just said and what Rich has just said about these sort of very local trends, and how we're seeing really globally many of those are really happening globally as well. And I wanted to just go through those a little bit, and then so people can just get a feeling what they feel is relevant to them from a more local Oxfordshire perspective. I've got a few slides, so I could just share my screen.
Please do.
Let me see. Let's try and get this working. Share. There we go. Can you see my screen?
You've got it. Yep, perfect.
Yep. So that's me. That's where I work at the moment. So Hadid's been there about 5 years. Before that, I was a partner at a company called Foster & Partners. I was there about 14 years. Some of the projects I worked on there. So yeah, what happens when we get to burst out the bubble eventually, which should hopefully be, reasonably soon. So about a year ago, I was asked to, this time last year, I was speaking at a conference about the future of the office. And 1 year ago, pre-COVID, these were the things which I really felt were most relevant then. connection and collaboration, health and well-being, flexibility, adaptability, inclusive spaces, and smart buildings. And those were really what was emerging at the time. And now I feel 1 year later, as we're coming out, hopefully the other end of COVID, those things have just been really accelerated. They haven't gone away. They've become more important. In terms of connection and collaboration, the speakers before spoke about the importance, Elaine spoke about the importance of community and collaboration. And really, this is one of the key reasons people are coming back to the office who can't get that from being at home from Zoom calls. And we're seeing a real rise in people wanting more open floor plates, things like open staircases in them to get between floors, really more identity in the building as well and in the workplace, because maybe visitors, new staff, aren't seen as spaces so much, aren't there that much, and they need to get that kind of injection of what's this place all about, what's this company about. And then really they're being much more about learning environments, meeting environments, social environments, health and well-being is much more front and center, of course, in people's minds. And that's as Dean mentioned as well about mental health, it's mental as well as physical health. And really things like daylight views and nature, both inside and outside, make a real difference to physical health, mental health, and productivity. People want their individual control over stuff, because at home you can change the lighting, you can change the temperature, and they want to be able to do that in the office now as well. And I think this thing of density, and that was something that that Richard touched on. People kind of maybe having the same amount of space as they had before. Maybe they got less desk space because people are doing that at home, but they've got more meeting space. But the actual desk space, I think, will be a much more comfortable density. People won't be being packed in so much. And then, so Richard also talked about flexibility. Super important going forward. People being really, especially in economically difficult times, people being able to do more with less. Much more multi-purpose spaces, but also, and this is something that that Elaine mentioned, which was variety. Variety of spaces for users, much more user diverse spaces, and finally, smart buildings. We were seeing that a lot more. One of the things that came up, particularly in a couple of buildings we've just finished during the pandemic, is about touchless technology. So things like lifts that know where you're going to go to, and you don't have to touch the button. So user responsive spaces, but also because it remembers what users want, these become self-learning spaces, and that can help us to optimize energy, optimize space, etc. And then finally, I just wanted to give a little bit more of a local Atlanta perspective. This is actually my wife in her office in Atlanta. Richard, and
I did recognize an EC, yeah.
Absolutely. And the thing here was just about really one of the key things that Richard said was about repurposing space. So this was a warehouse before, an industrial building, and we're seeing those being much more popular now, particularly post-pandemic, hopefully post-pandemic. And these are some of the reasons why. You've got your own entrance straight off the street. There's outdoor space that's easily accessible, high ceilings, well ventilated. Her office is about 50 people, and they're all on one floor together. There's daylight, because it's 1 story high, there's daylight from above. So nice, it's very flexible and adaptive. There's a lot of visibility across space, because what's the point of going to the office if you can't see people? And then car parking again, because people are not really able to use public transport as much. And that's it. And so something which, again, with Richard's business, with industrial and warehouse buildings as well, I don't know if he's seen there's been an uptick at all in people thinking of any kind of conversion of those, but that's something in Atlanta that's certainly happened. And I think that's going to be one of the key, moving forward, that's going to be one of the key areas that's going to happen. And that's it. Yeah. That's me.
Fantastic. No, brilliant, Arjun. Really great to get a global perspective and your thoughts of space moving forward. We have got some questions in the chat. Again, apologies for running over, but if all of our speakers are happy to stay with us for the next 5 minutes or so, we can just run through. I think you've answered one of the questions, Richard, but Frank had a question. I can find it. Where are we? Where's Frank's question gone? I think he was talking about Airbnb style, more sort of short-term commercial leases. Yeah, Richard, will we see more Airbnb style flexible commercial leases post-COVID? Startups, for example, are more often unable to commit until momentum established.
Yeah, I think we will. I think, as Elaine said, the serviced office market has been impacted probably immediately because of the flexibility of those leases, that people dropped off quite quickly. But as she said, it's coming back, and I think that flexibility will continue, and that we're already seeing greater demand from a number of companies wanting to come into Oxford and set up those innovation style flexible facilities. The problem is availability of space. Certainly in the city centre, there's very little. If you wanted to set up an innovation centre, it's almost impossible to find that space. So it'll mean it'll have to go to the ring road. I think also, in answer to Arjun's observations about that sort of flexible warehouse type accommodation, Oxford didn't really have that industrialized past, other than the car works at Cowley, which are still being used. So our city centre space is mainly taken over by college university accommodation. We've not got that heritage, therefore, of older style space to convert. But what we're seeing is developers are now looking at the sort of warehouse style accommodation as a different type of property to produce. So on the Oxford Business Park at the moment, we've got a planning application in for 3 buildings of about 30,000 square foot as high office content sheds. So we're going to put real design detail into the externals to make them look smart. Exposed services for the offices, and then we're going to put in the interior space will be 8 meters eaves height. You can do what you want in it, production, R&D, but you'll then have flexibility in the office accommodation. So you could go from say 10,000 to 20,000 square foot of offices relatively easily. So it's that flexibility, because I think commercial property is pretty inelastic. You take a box and that's fixed. So this then gives you that ability to flex a little bit, and it's also slightly cheaper to build. So you've got economies of scale on that, better for energy efficiency. So that's one innovation, which is really a byproduct of this demand from science and tech in Oxford, which comes in such a wide spectrum of different types of property.
Excellent. Thank you, Richard. I mean, I'll leave it to you guys now to wrap up, really. Dean, you got anything you'd like to sort of, as a last comment before we wrap up?
No, the only final comment really was one of the questions prompted about have we seen a change in what our customers are looking for. For us, it's a normal recession is about affordability. So we see more of our customers choosing to refurbish their existing stock and put off that larger capital expenditure for larger projects. And that's purely based on affordability and the confidence to invest significant sums. We've seen it different this year because we've had as well as the affordability question and build or not build, there's the perception, the political aspect of being seen to be spending sums of money when the country is in a time of crisis. We found that different. So we've sort of moved predominantly what we do is education. We've seen a significant increase in our work in the public sector, but we do see the education market coming back quite strongly now. But yeah, it's been very different in terms of our customers' decisions to build or not to build.
Thank you, Dean. And apologies, that was an earlier question which I missed. So thanks for pulling that one out. Elaine, do you have any final comments you'd like to add?
Sorry, no, I was just trying to find my mute button. No, other than, I think to Dean's point, I think it's kind of interesting that the government are keen to keep things moving. We're responding to quite a lot of consultancy opportunities at the moment for councils that want to spend money around future high streets, left behind towns, getting building funding, etc., etc. So I think that's going to stimulate quite a lot of new things coming on board. I mean, I'm thinking about it mainly from the innovation space, and I just think that's going to be quite interesting over the next 12 months or so. We could end up with quite a plethora of things on the market actually as a result. Probably less so in Oxfordshire, to be fair, but certainly around the rest of the country, that's what we're kind of expecting to see.
So you currently got, how many is it, 26 odd centres?
Currently 26, yeah, and we've got probably our strongest pipeline ever, and we've done more consultancy projects this year than we ever have done before, and those projects have been around mapping, designing, assessing demand for spaces, new innovation spaces across the country, and most of them are initiated by some form of, economic development or regeneration funding, although some of them are very interesting with central government departments, which I'm not allowed to talk about, so I won't.
So give me a number. 12 months time, number of Oxford innovation sites up and down the country will be from 26, and it will be,
well, let's say double. No,
really,
double.
well, 52. You heard it here. That's it. Final go.
Go on, 30, I reckon.
30. Oh, conservative. Thanks, Elaine. Such bravado. Richard, I think we've had our money's worth from you today. But do you want a final word before
I mean, I'm always optimistic. You have to be when you're a commercial agent because you deal with solicitors. I'm optimistic for next year. I think that science and tech will be a significant driver. We're already seeing it, and I don't think it should be sort of underestimated the impact that the vaccine research has had on our area and what's going to come next. So I think it's really exciting for Oxford going forward. As ever, that political planning context is a difficult one to deal with. But glass half full.
Brilliant, top man. Thank you. Good to see you and your Christmas jumper. And let's finish off on a global perspective from Atlanta. Arjun.
Yeah, so I think everyone's covered so much. The sort of key thing I think is just flexibility. What Richard was talking about with this new kind of this sort of building typology he's working with at the moment. Adaptable, flexible spaces, and I think that goes from interiors through to design of buildings through to town planning. And the ability to be able to change what's going on in spaces on a daily basis, to invigorate them, curating them more, and then over time so they can evolve. And I think we're finding that so necessary with the office market, but also with the high streets. Back to that, how are they going to be able to evolve effectively? And I think being able to be quickly adaptable and flexible and to be changeable through the day, through the weekend, through the weeks, that's going to help reinvigorate them. Much appreciated. Thanks very much to Dean, to Elaine, to Richard, and to Arjun, and to everybody for joining us and for staying with us beyond 12:30. Have a good weekend, and thanks for watching. Take care.